Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to a delayed post-game reaction. I celebrated my 33rd birthday last night with my wife, so I took the night off, the final night I will be taking off before the season starts, and had a great time, had a great birthday. I appreciate you all for the wishes on here, on Discord, on X, but we have some basketball to attend to. So the Lakers lost 117-116 to the Sacramento Kings to drop to, or to conclude the preseason at 1-5. We have a lot to get into from this game, a lot that we learned, including the opening night starting lineup, or the projected starting lineup for opening night. JJ seemed to indicate that and then kind of took it back after the game. So we'll see if he ends up sticking with this group. But there was a big surprise, obviously, with that. Then a little bit more with the rotation, a little bit more with individual player performances. Marcus Smart had a really impressive game on both sides of the ball, and I thought made a push for a larger role in the rotation. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to Davon. I like the name. It's close to Jovan. For becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate you all. And yeah, I mean, I'm approaching Unk status, but don't you dare call me Unk. I'm not quite there yet. I still got a few more years. But let's get into the game. So Lakers lose 117-116. Ultimately, preseason result does not matter. They were up in this game when they played their primary rotation through the first, let's say 3.5 quarters or so. They still had some regulars out there deep into the fourth, but they did not close with Luka, Austin, DeAndre Ayton, Rui, etc. So we got a preview of the primary rotation for 3.5 quarters, and a lot to get into, a lot to take away. So I'm going to start. I'm going to table the starting group and the rotation for the individual takeaways. In terms of my overarching thoughts from this game, I'm going to start big picture here with just how I view the Lakers right now going into the preseason. Obviously, there is a lot that we don't yet know with this group, right? We still have not seen LeBron with them. We only had one dress rehearsal game with this team at I would say close to full strength, because LeBron's going to be out for at least a few weeks. Bronny and Adu do not project to be rotation players at this stage. So this was, I think, the primary 9 to 9.5 players who are going to be starting or, playing together on opening night and then for the foreseeable future. So we did get a glimpse at the rotation, but based on this game, and I think some of the semi-regular stretches we saw of maybe not, again, because Luka and Marcus only played in a couple games, we can't take away too much overall, I think, but we can get the essence and some of just how this team is. I was very impressed with this group's offense overall, particularly against the Kings, but for most of the preseason, I think this team is going to be a high-level offensive team. For this game in particular, just because it's the closest thing we've seen to them at full strength, I would give them an A- for the offense. They scored 116 points, easily could have been somewhere between 124 to 130, with guys being able to make entry passes and connect on lobs. The lob connection, with the exception of Jackson, has just not been there. They're still figuring it out with DeAndre Ayton, both Luka and Ayton, Austin and Ayton. Entry passes for guys with deep seals and stuff, those are getting tipped, and some of the passing can certainly be better in terms of just simple reads and getting the bigs closer to the rim. Also, Vando has been one of the guys that they've struggled at times to connect with, but that point being was they probably left some points on the board just in terms of how they were functioning already. But I thought the offensive organization, the pace, the getting out in transition, the hit ahead passes, getting into early offense. I thought the screening was a bit better. The just overall organization offensively was at a very high level in this game. So I think that's the thing I leave the preseason super encouraged by. And, the thing that to me is going to apply moving forward here. Now, we have to have an honest conversation about the defense, because I would give the defense a D based on this game against the Kings, and I don't know how much higher I would go throughout the preseason. The defense continues to be the thing I'm most discouraged and concerned with. I think they look like a bottom 10 defense right now. And it's interesting because they from like a playmaking perspective, they had 10 steals tonight. And there are these like moments where Smart had 4 steals. Again, I'll touch on him in a little bit. Vando, we know, has done a really impressive job pressuring guys and like looking more like himself. Ayton has been active in pick and roll, but they've also had these breakdowns that are just like Sacramento. And to also be clear on this, like Sacramento is playing its not even its B team, like somewhere between its B and C team. And this is a team that I don't even think is going to be a play-in team. So we've seen now through the Sacramento game, the Suns games, and the Warriors games, I think the Lakers really struggle with quick teams that are athletic on the perimeter. All 3 of those teams have a certain amount of speed and athleticism that I think really gave the Lakers problems. And I thought it was interesting that I thought the Lakers' best defensive stretches of the preseason came against Dallas, and Dallas is a slow team. Dallas is a big and slow team. So I think the Lakers, at least from what we've been able to extract from the preseason, if you are small and quick and athletic, you can run on the Lakers, and they're going to struggle to keep the ball in front and to make certain rotations against you, which I think Golden State, Phoenix, and Sacramento all exploited to various degrees. If you are big and slow, the Lakers have a lot of positional size, and that actually plays into their strengths. And I mean, there have been some things defensively, like the defensive rebounding, I think has been something that I've been impressed by. I think the transition defense has progressively gotten better, but there were too many possessions in the half court where Sacramento was just waltzing to the rim. And I think it's a little bit on everybody. It's on the point of attack or, on ball defender. I think it's on help defenders. Sometimes it's on Ayton. Like there's plenty of blame to go around with that. But I would say coming off this game, I would give the offense an A- and the defense a D. I think they look like a top 10 to top 5 offense, and I think they look like a bottom 10 defense right now. And to me, it's looking like there's going to be a lot of 125 to 120 games for the Lakers, and it's really just going to be a matter of like, are they making shots, getting to the free throw line, and getting out in transition that night, and vice versa, like with the opponent, how's their opponent performing offensively? Because I think they have a lot of work on the defensive end. So that's my big picture takeaway from this game, but super encouraged by the offense. Like the offense, despite how little practice time and actual like on court reps they've had, I think there's been a lot of progress with the offense, and I think they are looking like a team that's going to actualize their potential. A lot of encouraging things with Luka hitting 6 threes, Gabe 4, Rui 4, Marcus hit a couple, like 17 threes against the Kings. That to me, it depends how you want to look at things, but like the offense is really encouraging. The defense is equally discouraging, but we'll see on opening night against the Kings. Notable performers have to start with Luka, who only played in 2 preseason games, but looked awesome in both games. He's in better shape. His shot is falling, 31 points, 5 rebounds, 9 assists. Could have had easily like 11, 12, 13 assists if guys were making shots or catching passes or whatnot. 8 for 6 shooting, 6 for 11 on threes, 9 for 12 at the free throw line. Did a great job of drawing fouls. Luka looks to be in midseason form, and steal, a block. Some of the on-ball stuff, he got blown by several times, and that continues to be a bit of an issue through the first couple of games. But I thought there was some pretty good help defensive possessions from Luka. He was aggressive defensively, and I'd rather, like, he had 3 fouls, and I like when Luka picks up fouls. I'd rather him be more active and aggressive and engaged on that end than Rui, 18 points. He got out in transition, had a nice deep seal, was hitting everything in terms of kick out passes for threes. Only 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal. You'd like to see him contribute in more ways than just the scoring. And with the way that the matchups kind of worked out, he was more of just like a spot up defender. Kind of, they were going with a lot of like stretch fours that Rui was matching up with, whether it was Saric or sometimes Isaac Jones, who was actually playing more in the paint. But like Rui was kind of stretched out a little bit, so wasn't as active of a help defender tonight, but led the team plus 16 plus minus. DeAndre Ayton, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block. They got him going, especially in like second and third quarter with, especially third. Luka hit him with a nice pocket pass for a jumper. They got him a couple of post-ups for quick turnaround middies. He continues to not have the screening, timing, and rhythm down with either Luka or Austin. And he's also struggled a bit catching in traffic and finishing. And he's had several plays this preseason where he catches, he's trying to decide what to do, then he'll just kind of fling up a hook shot and has missed those more often than not. So I think he's a guy that the Lakers are still trying to figure out like how he fits because he is such a different player than Jackson. One thing I think he can improve on, aside from just the catching and going up a bit quicker, is like I think that the screening has to be better. He's slipping and ghosting screens too frequently, in my opinion, and I think he needs to do a better job of making contact on his screens. And I think the times he's gotten free and shaken loose in the pick and roll has been making contact, but he sometimes doesn't do that. But defensively, like really good job on the defensive glass. I thought the rim protection wasn't as good tonight as it's been earlier in the preseason, but overall, I think he's exceeded expectations on the defensive end. Gabe Vincent, the surprise starter, which again, we'll touch on in a second, 14 points, hit 4 threes. I thought did his job, and he's become this team's, they've needed a floor spacer, and Gabe Vincent has become that early on in the preseason. So good stuff from Gabe in that regard, though I have a lot of thoughts on the starting lineup. Austin Reeves, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists. Really struggled from deep, 0 for 7 on threes, 3 for 8 on twos, missed a bunch of middies. I think based on his first 3 games, I'm going to give him a bit of a pass or some grace here just because he was hitting everything, shooting nearly 60% through the first 3 games. So he was due for a little bit of an off night to regress closer to his mean. But I thought that the big thing with him tonight was the playmaking, where the playmaking had not been there the first 3 games. And a bunch of really nice reads from Austin tonight, including that one deep seal for Rui. But he was hitting some bullet passes, some behind the back or over the shoulder passes, and another guy who easily could have had 10, 11, 12 assists if more guys made shots or the connections were a little bit better. So offensively did struggle, and that will be something to continue to monitor. But again, through the first 4 games, I would say he's been really good offensively as a scorer in 3 of the 4. So again, I think you take that with him, though you do want to see him, I think have a higher floor maybe, but I think this is a rare. Austin does not have a lot of 3 for 15 nights in the regular season. Off the bench, Marcus Smart, to me, I will hit on him a little bit more a little later, but 14 points. We saw the potential offensively from him where he had a Euro step decel, and he had a couple nice drives. He had a pull-up midi, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 steals. A lot to be encouraged by with Marcus. Vando I think has had a couple of quiet games relatively in a row after really impressing against Golden State and Phoenix to start the preseason. I think he's been settling in seemingly to a smaller role, but has not quite been as impactful of an on-ball and perimeter defender, in my opinion. Also not making as much of an impact offensively or on the offensive glass. Went 2 for 6. Airballed. Lakers ran a play for a Vando quarter 3, which I did not get. It was a nice play. I just wish it wasn't for Vando, and he airballed the quarter 3. So the offense continues to be like he's I forgot what he was against Dallas, but he's at least like 1 for 11 on threes through up to this point. So like the shot is just not there, and that was a bit of fool's gold in training camp. Laravia had a pretty quiet game, and he's a guy I want to touch on a little bit more when we get into the rotation. Jackson Hayes had a really nice shift but he ended up getting a right wrist contusion and exiting the game early. So 6 points, 4 rebounds for him. We didn't get to see him play in the second half. And that's about it for the rotation. Stat of the night for me, I'm going to go with the 17 threes. I thought this was the first night. It wasn't just like a guy like Gabe getting hot, or we've seen individuals get hot, but this to me was the collective of the group, where again, you had 4 guys hit 2 or more threes, including 3 of them hit 4 or more. So we started to see the offensive ceiling with this group. And I think, again, if they play like their regular rotation, they win this game. They probably win this game by double digits, and they probably hit 20 plus threes in it. So I thought this was, again, arguably the most encouraging offensive performance. Also factoring in that Luka and Austin had 17 combined assists, and that easily could have been 22, 23, 24. Now let's get into the takeaway. So takeaway number 1, the starting lineup is revealed, and it was shocking. I came on here and I said that I thought it was going to be Rui and Vando, because through the first 3 preseason games, that had been a combination that JJ had stuck with. And at the same time, the signs had been there, right? Like whenever we've had the starting lineup discussion, I've expressed some skepticism with Vando, just because going back to last season, JJ viewed him as more of an 8th or 9th man and rarely played him 20 minutes, especially when the team was at full strength. And based on the buzz Vando was getting, based on the way JJ talked about him, based on him starting, based on his performance, I thought he deserved to start going into last night's game. But clearly JJ did not view it that way. And not only did he not start, he was the 8th man. He played 14 minutes. And so despite things looking a certain way earlier in the preseason and him getting out to a really impressive start, I think really not much has changed in terms of how JJ views Vando's offensive limitations, and just the way that limits his role in a JJ Redick rotation. Like I've said at this point a million times, like JJ loves shooting, JJ loves spacing, JJ seems to default to more of the offensive end. And that's where actually Gabe, to me, this was actually more of in my opinion, an offensive decision than a defensive decision. And also an availability decision, because I would argue that my reasoning and argument for Marcus Smart to start was a lot of the same reasoning for Gabe to start. I just thought that Marcus is a better defender, which I still believe is the case. And I thought he showed that tonight against Sacramento. But I thought it was kind of the blend of like, you wanted a perimeter defender who could defend multiple positions and a guy who could play off the ball and space credibly. And that's where Vando falls short. He's not a spacer, and he comes with real limitations. Jake LaRavia was an interesting one, but he just didn't have quite the defensive ceiling as even a Gabe necessarily, but especially a Marcus or a Vando. So it's kind of like Marcus was the one guy, in my opinion, that kind of blended both sides of the ball to a certain level that you wanted, where like LaRavia, I've argued is maybe their best 2-way player, but through the first 5 preseason games, it was actually Gabe, and Gabe led this team in threes made in the preseason. He shot the ball really well in at least 3 of the first 5 games. And I think it was actually more of, in terms of Gabe, Jake, Vando, Marcus, the best offensive player in the preseason and best shooter going into this 6th game was easily Gabe. It was not even close. Then you factor in the defensive end, where he's got a higher ceiling, especially as a point of attack guy, than LaRavia. Marcus, we had just not seen yet. And JJ talked earlier in the preseason about availability being a factor with the starters. So I think that's what's knocked Marcus out. But it seemed, I guess, to come down to Gabe versus Vando. And just because of the offensive end, Gabe was ahead of him. And you could argue like Gabe, I think, is a better chaser and screen navigator than Vando, and specifically for the Golden State matchup, I think JJ maybe just likes that more against Steph. But to me, this ended up being the guy who contributed the most collectively on both sides of the ball was Gabe. Now, do I agree with this? No, I don't. I actually think, to me, that this pushes it more for, I think, an argument for Marcus to start, where I think he's not the shooter that Gabe is, and I don't think he's the point of attack defender that Gabe is either. I think Gabe is a bit quicker at this stage of his career and better at slithering around screens. But I still think that Marcus, especially with what we saw tonight, the passing from Marcus, last night, the passing from Marcus and the defensive playmaking, again, if you're looking for that blend that helps on both sides of the ball, I think Marcus is a more impactful defender than Gabe, and maybe doesn't have the shooting upside that Gabe has, but he did hit a couple of threes. He was greasing the wheels as a passer and secondary guy, getting downhill and making some nice baseline reads, and I thought he was helping the offense hum. And then defensively, I thought he's a more impactful and better defender. So this like longer term, I think for me at least confirmed, I think Marcus should be the starter, and that could be the way that this ultimately trends. JJ did say that he implied this was going to be the starting group for opening night, but that he's not committed to a starting group longer term. So I think maybe this trends as long as Marcus can stay healthy and have a certain workflow and rhythm, like he can eventually get into the starting group. But from a process perspective, I got it, because the Lakers, the thing I was arguing for forever was like they needed a backcourt defender, and that was my argument for Rui to not start. But obviously LeBron going out, that changed that. Rui's the LeBron replacement. And then for this fifth spot, they still needed a backcourt guy. I think for now, you could argue based on performance, like Gabe deserved it. I'm not going to quibble with that. But I think longer term, there is a limitation, in my opinion, to Gabe being your best defender in the lineup. I think he's more of a secondary guy, and I think that spot needs to be Vando or Smart. I'm trying to be realistic here and just look at, like, I don't think JJ is going to start Vando. This was the opportunity to start Vando, and despite some of the optimism, it just looks like he doesn't view him in that manner. And, I'm sure you guys will have questions about that. We'll get into it a little bit more, but JJ just values shooting, and Vando has continued to be a glaring negative on that side of the ball. So that's takeaway number one. We learned a bit about the starting group. I think it should be Marcus personally moving forward. I think Gabe is because the issue with Gabe is he's just a point of attack guy, and he can guard some twos, but he's primarily a point guard defender. And now you're putting so much on Rui. And this is the same issue that we had with the OG starting group or the OG projected starting group, where Rui should just not be your primary wing stopper. You need that's where Smart and Vando can slide between being point of attack and wing. I've not been impressed with Marcus's point of attack defense, so that is a concern, I guess, with starting him. And the Lakers just it's really whack-a-mole on defense right now, where they have so many limitations with the lineups and the groups they could put together that I don't really know what the right answer is. I've argued the right answer is probably not on the roster, and that's more of a player they need to go trade for. But I would say for now, based on the current options, I don't think it's going to be Vando because of the offense. And I think between Smart and Gabe, I think Smart is overall a better player and a more versatile, bigger, and more impactful defender. And that should be the player who earns that spot, in my opinion. Takeaway number two is going to be the rest of the rotation. So I mentioned Vando was the eighth man. He we thought he was potentially going to start or maybe be like the sixth man, depending on maybe it was Smart versus Vando and then Vando would be the sixth guy. No. It was the five starters: Ayton, Rui, Gabe, Austin, Luka, which on paper is a 3-guard lineup, but really defensively it's a 2-guard lineup. Austin and Gabe are guard defenders. Luka's a forward defender. So it's not quite Darvin Ham. It is in the neighborhood, but not quite fully there. But then the sixth man was Marcus Smart, who came in for Gabe a few minutes into both the first and third. Jake LaRavia was the seventh man. Vando was the eighth man, and sort of like the co-eighth man with Jackson Hayes in the first half and Maxi Kleba in the second half. So Vando, I think JJ played his hand, and again, there was a little bit of they were hyping him up a bit, but when it actually came down to what JJ believes in and what JJ trusts, it clearly is not a non-shooter and a non-floor spacer in Vando. And despite how good he was or even great he was defensively, there just is a floor there, clearly, with how JJ views it. Laravia is an interesting one because I think you could argue, especially with Smart's performance against the Kings, of that group of like Gabe, Laravia, Smart, Vando, and even if we want to throw Rui in there, I think Laravia has performed the worst of those guys. So if you really are basing it off of like merit and performance, I think Laravia should be more the 8th guy and Vando more the 7th guy. But again, I think like Laravia came in for Austin. So if we're looking at like the sub pattern here, it was Smart for Gabe. So that seems to be like that 5th starter competition is more between Smart and Gabe, which again, I think it should go to Smart. Laravia came in for Austin. So that was more of like using him as a guard offensively and leveraging the ball handling and playmaking, although they were basically just sticking him in the corners and not really involving him too much. Then Vando came in for Rui. So he was more of like the backup 4 and which makes sense offensively, but defensively, again, you know, he could play multiple positions. Jackson and Maxey were the backup 5s, you know, Maxey after Jackson got injured. And then Dalton was in, you know, not even in the rotation, which again, I've talked about going into the season. I viewed him as the 11th man, post LeBron injury, 10th man. He was the 10th man tonight. It's just the 10th man didn't play until late into the 4th quarter. So I don't view Dalton right now as maybe he's a 1-shift player. I think that's the right call. I don't think we've talked about Dalton before. He struggled going back to really the end of last season, but certainly through summer league into the preseason. He's not looked like a rotation player up to this point. And when you couple in that the Lakers are defending at the current level that they're defending at, I don't see how you could throw Dalton in there and expect for that to get any better. So it's looking like they might go with maybe 9.5. Maybe Dalton gets like a first half shift some games, but it's looking more like a tighter 9-man rotation for now. Thoughts again, I'd like to see more from Laravia, and if he's just going to be more of a catch and shoot guy, which it seemed to be more trending that way with a full squad, like the ball was flowing through Luka, Austin, and Marcus in a heavy way, and then like a little bit Gabe, and then everybody else was more of just finishers. Laravia has just kind of been in a weird spot offensively where he's not as involved. They're not generating as many looks for him. And then defensively, I think he's been fine, but he's not at the Smart Gabe Vando level. So it's like he's kind of in this in between right now with the role where I feel like they're still trying to figure that out with him. And then takeaway number 3 before we get into the Q&A here. Golden State preview. Like I think Golden State's going to be a tough matchup for them. It sounds like Moses Moody is going to be out. So that is I think it's a break for the Lakers because he's played well against them. He's, I think, arguably their best Luka defender, or at least their best option to put on Luka. He's also shot really well against the Lakers and just been a guy that for whatever reason has big performances against them. And he's you know, sneaky cutter and offensive rebounder. Like I think he's one of those like energy guys that can give the Lakers problems. That them not having him, I think, is a big loss for Golden State. But we don't yet know, I think, who they're like. It's going to be Steph, Pods, Jimmy, Draymond, and then the 5th guy could be Horford, could be Kuminga, could be Buddy Hield. I'm going to be interested to see how LA matches up with that. I would assume it's going to be Gabe on Steph, Austin on Pods, Rui on Jimmy. Luka's going to hide on whoever's the not like, I don't know, Draymond, but then now you're involving him directly in the actions with Steph. And then Ayton, if it's Kuminga, maybe it's Luka on Kuminga and Ayton on Draymond. If it's Horford, it's probably Ayton on Horford, Luka on Draymond. And then if it's Buddy, I guess it's Luka on Buddy and Ayton on Draymond. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough matchup. I'm like, they shoot a lot of threes. They play fast. They get out in transition. They're constantly moving. The Lakers have really struggled with their off-ball screen communication and decision-making. They've struggled with their help defense. Granted, Golden State's not a team that puts a lot of pressure on the rim, doesn't get to the free throw line a lot. So I think that plays into some of the Lakers' strengths. But the shooting, the pace, and the offensive rebounds can be concerns in this matchup. Now, I think we've seen Luka cook this team. Austin has played well against them. I think Ayton, it's going to be a big opportunity for him to have a big offensive night with just scoring around the basket, offensive rebounds. But this is going to be a real test because this is a well-oiled machine that they've had the same system for over a decade. It's only been Steph and Draymond running that system for over a decade, but I think there's like an institutional knowledge that a lot of Golden State's role players have that they just fit the system and the system does not change. And because of that, I think it's a hard system to pick up, but once you pick it up, like you kind of know it. And whereas I feel like the Lakers are not quite on that level yet in terms of knowing exactly what they want to do. I think they do offensively. They're pretty close. They're probably 70 to 80% of the way there offensively. Defensively, I don't even know if they're 50% there. Like I thought, I don't know. I'm sure you guys saw JJ's interview with Mike Trudell at halftime, but I thought it was hilarious because he was like, he asked about the offensive end, and then he was like, well, we got to, if we could make our lob passes, we would have had 72 points. And he's like, what about the defensive end? He's like, I didn't see much of it. He's like, what needs to improve? Everything. And like, that's kind of where they're at. The defense has been a mess, and there's been some moments of brilliance from individual guys. But if you can get the Lakers into like defending for 18 seconds, something good is just been happening for most of the preseason. And that's largely been against like second and third unit groups. So I am interested to see how they match up with, and look, maybe they have, for whatever reason, because it's the preseason or I don't know, not been giving their all on the defensive end. I think like if you're out there, you should be giving your all, regardless of the opponent, regardless of what you're doing. And I don't know, we'll see. But I think that the keys for the Golden State game and the things I'm going to be watching offensively, like I think they're gonna do their thing, and I don't have many questions. But like, are they able to get back in transition? Are they matching up? Are they communicating? Are they mindful, especially off the ball, with Golden State's cutting and split actions and like double pin downs and like all these different intricacies that Golden State has? I think that just how LA is able to handle that, because I think right now, like, it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a game that's in the 120s, probably at least like 115 plus, probably in the 120s. I think it's gonna be a fun game, but it might come down to who defends the best. And right now, I have a bit more confidence in Golden State, but this defense than the Lakers defense. But LA might just be able to outscore them. And I think that's probably going to be the recipe for success for this group to start. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Anthony Gray. Thank you for the super chat. Watching full advertisements for you, my guy. Love the work. Keep up the excellence. SFG. Keep going. Happy birthday. I appreciate Anthony. Thank you so much. And means the world. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. Lakers not settling on a starting lineup and making odd decisions about Vando. Where have I heard that one before? You heard that one before with Darvin Ham, and I know people are making that comparison, and I get it. Again, I think the difference with the 3-guard look with Ham versus Redick was it was 3 guards defensively, and despite Luka being a point guard, he is not a guard defensively. It is similar to like, we could factor in LeBron here. Like Luka and LeBron are the LA version of Franz and Paolo, where those are the 2 primary ball handlers, decision makers, shot creators in Orlando, but they are forwards defensively. With LeBron and Luka, it's the same thing. They are the ball handlers, lead primary decision makers, but they are forwards defensively. So because of that, you do, like a guy like a Gabe or a Marcus can make it look like a 3-guard lineup technically offensively, but defensively, it's just Austin and Gabe as like the true guards. Luka should not be guarding guards. He is not quick enough to guard guards. You want him on like the lesser front court threat. That's just, and his strength is as a help defender. And we've seen it with steals and poking dribbles loose and making rotations. Like that's where Luka's strength is defensively, not on the ball. So you want him in a helper role in the front court. With Vando, I just think it comes down to like the shot. The shot is not, shot's not great right now, right? And I don't see that changing. So I'm not, I kind of feel like Vando is stuck in a lesser role. Like maybe he can play his way into the 7th man, but I think if he was going to start, this was the time, and it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Erickson, thank you for the super chat. This team feels disjointed and lacks defense, athleticism, and toughness. I'm not usually pessimistic, but we feel too far from contention to me. I think LeBron coming in at like full strength or close to it is going to help a lot. And it's just, there's going to be, Rui's going to play a little bit less. Well, I don't know if Vando can play a little bit. He's already playing 14 minutes, but like LaRavia, I think will play a little bit less. Gabe, Smart, those minutes will collectively go to LeBron, who's just a much better player than all those guys. So I think from a talent perspective that they're certainly missing their second best player, second most important player, a big piece of what they're trying to do. But the defense and the athleticism have stood out. They have looked, the defense has been a struggle basically all. So right now I'm looking at their numbers and these numbers are a bit wonky because there are some non-NBA teams in here. So I want to be careful with how much we extract from this, but like they've actually been better defensively than offensively. Through the preseason, they're 28th in offense, 24th in defense. I think the offense has looked much better than the defense, but the athleticism has really stood out though. Like they're just getting blown by on the perimeter in a concerning way that I don't like. There's no real fix to that other than get faster players. I don't know. I hear the pessimism and I am a bit concerned about the defense, but I think they have enough talent and depth to beat a lot of teams with their offense. And if they can just nudge the defense closer to average, I think that's the formula, as I've talked about earlier in the preseason. We just have not really seen many average stretches from this team defensively. And then also when factoring in the level of competition that they're playing, that's where it kind of trends from like a yellow flag a little bit into the red. Rob Palinka and Jeannie Bus are trash emoji. Thank you for the super chat. If offense is going to be our best defense, then AR and JJ need to be 1,000% better than what they presented us. JJ has no counters and AR's shot is shaky. I'll push back a little bit on Austin's shot. If we look at his preseason numbers overall, he averaged 18.5 points on 46% shooting, which is good, especially for a shot creating guard. 23% on threes is bad. And that is where that was very much tilted based off of this last game going 0 for 7. But even if he's in the low 30s, that's just not good enough. And that's been the thing I said to watch with Austin all season is how is he functioning off the ball? How is he functioning as a catch and shoot guy? So obviously not the preseason result. Like the two of the games, he was primarily on the ball with no Luka, but off of the ball, you like to see a little bit more stability with him with that. 3.5 rebounds, just under 4 assists, 3 turnovers. Like the playmaking was actually my biggest criticism of Austin up to this point, and then that got better against Sacramento, but then the shot completely fell off. It was one game. His numbers were above 50% shooting and above 30% shooting on threes before this, so I don't want to overreact too much to, like, I think he was good as a shooter / scorer in 3 of the 4 games. I don't want to overreact to that, but the 3-point shooting is something to monitor, and it is something that we need to continually check in on. And then the passing, I thought was something that had not quite been there until this last game. But yeah, I mean, the offense can be better, but I think from a process perspective, they have left a lot on the table still with low hanging fruit and even just connecting on simple things like lobs, pocket passes, inbounds passes. How many inbounds passes have they had stolen or tipped away or whatever? So they're going to get better on that end. I think that stuff is like very correctable. It's the defensive end that I don't know how much better that gets. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Is Vando the worst offensive player in the league? I don't think so, but because I think with him, like there are many layers to offense other than just, if you want to say like just pure scoring or like go get yourself a bucket, he's obviously toward the bottom, especially among perimeter guys, if you're not including him in just bigs. But there's other elements to his game with like the playmaking, the short roll playmaking. He is someone who has been a primary ball handler and playmaker earlier in his career. And sometimes like some of the bigs that you see that have a certain touch with the passing, it's because they play point guard growing up, right? And Vando is one of those guys. So I think the passing, the offensive putbacks, but granted, neither one of those things is scoring, right? Like, really? So, I mean, the finishing, the catching, and creating his own shot, and also the shooting, that is in, a very concerning percentile among perimeter players. And this has been my one argument for those who continue to push for Vando having a larger role is I'm like, where is the perimeter player who has his same limitations on a really, really good team that is playing as much as some people want him to? Like, none of those guys with these types of limitations are starting and playing 20 plus minutes on like OKC, Denver, Houston, Minnesota, Cleveland, New York, Orlando. Like, look at all the top teams, and all of their perimeter players are just, they have a certain baseline level of, I'm mid 30s or higher 3-point shooter. I can rack a closeout and get to the rim and score. I can back up my man and finish a layup at the rim. Like, these have been things that Vando has really struggled with. And so that's where, like, it is, he's really a five. I mean, I continue to make this point, like, he's really a 5 on offense. And that's where the Kleba pairing was interesting. And I referenced that a couple days ago. Like, I thought he and Kleba, because Kleba can be a floor spacer, Vando can be a 5 offensively next to Kleba, and then Kleba could be the 5 defensively. I like that pairing, but it seems like Jackson's going to be the primary backup 5. So Vando is in a little bit of a tough spot where, like, he needed to show more offensively. I've been impressed with the athleticism, the physicality, the defense. He looks more like his old self. The one thing that has not really clicked yet, other than the one Golden State game, has been the offensive end. And I think it's tough to play a guy who's that much of a minus on that end. So I wouldn't say he's the worst offensive player in the league, but if we are filtering like through top 10 teams in the league and just perimeter players, he's in that conversation for most harmful perimeter player offensively among good teams. And that is a limiting factor here. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Off topic, need to upgrade my hair product game. Matte finish, high hold. What's the move, Jovan? I will give you a couple of recommendations. One is Cub & Co. Clay. It's an Australian hair care brand. It's what I currently have in, and I've tried literally over 40 hair products, and it's been my favorite. Another one is Rough Rider from Kevin Murphy. Those would be the 2 primary ones for this. Those are my 2 go-tos right now. Aiden, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, love what you do. Can we sign Seth Curry? They cannot. I believe January 17th is the date that they could sign a 15th roster player where the prorated amount is enough under the cap or enough under the first apron that LA can sign that player. So we're talking 3 months from now. 2, Golden State's actually in a similar situation with their apron situation. And the reason they signed or waived Seth is to sign him a month from now once their prorated amount is lower. So Seth is going to be a warrior. They needed to make a decision on, I believe it was between him and Santos, and they ended up waiving Seth for the time being because Santos factors more into the rotation. But long term, Seth is going to be a warrior, and they're going to re-sign him. Jay, Rui and Dalton for Isaac and Goga. Isaac is actually the other guy who you could probably throw in, though they do use him a little bit more at like Isaac and Vando are pretty similar in that regard, though I would even argue Isaac has probably shown more offensively. Just looking at, I'm pulling up his numbers right now quickly. I mean, he's had a 40% 3-point shooting. Last year he struggled 26%, but the 2 seasons before that, 40%, 38%, 60% on 2s a couple years ago. I think the finishing is certainly better with Isaac. Like, I trust him more inside the arc than Vando. The shot for both guys is not reliable. Rui and Dalton for Isaac and Goga. I think Rui's the best player in the deal. And I think you are taking out an important shooter. And right now, is Rui your third option? Arguably, it's probably between him and Gabe. Like, I feel like Ayton's actually been kind of slotted a little bit lower in the pecking order offensively. Rui might be your third most reliable offensive contributor right now. You do have the depth. Like Gabe and Ayton and Smart can probably collectively amass more. Rui's definitely the most consistent shooter of that group, though. I mean, I'd honestly prefer to flip Vando here. I don't know that Orlando does that. I don't know that they do this either. I'd rather have in a vacuum. I'd rather have Isaac and Goga than Rui and Dalton, and then Goga upgrades over Jackson as your backup. Though I think Jackson's been impressive. I would even say through the first, I've liked the Jackson minutes. In Jackson, I'm trying to think about this analogy. Jackson's kind of like he's kind of like dessert. Like you can, in the right doses, Jackson can be. Like, you have a scoop or two of ice cream. It's perfect and it hits a spot. It's great. You have 4 or 5 scoops of ice cream. It's a little bit too much. And then you get a stomach ache. Like that's kind of like Jackson, where in like 10 to 15 minute bursts, per game, he's good. You play him a little bit more and now you're going to get the stomach ache. So I think Jackson's been fine as a backup. So I don't know. This is an interesting one. I do think Rui is clearly the best player in here because of Isaac's offensive limitations. And I don't think the Lakers do this, to be honest, but it's interesting. Broken No Money, thank you for the super chat. I hope you also saw I talked about the Drew Holiday Vando comparisons a couple streams ago. Hope you caught that. I'm happy with the starting lineup because Gabe is the only movement shooter. Like he came on, pin downs and stack options and shot at a high level. Marcus off the bench, I'm cool with it. Get a playmaker. That like the argument to keep it is you are balancing more of a playmaking role with Marcus off the bench versus a shooting role with Gabe. I still think sometimes, though, when we have these conversations, we focus too much on the offensive. Like, because I agree that Gabe presents a wrinkle offensively that Marcus can't match. And I said that earlier. Like, he's a better shooter. And to your point with the pin downs, the stack, like he's a movement shooter who I think has played a big role. And he's been the most reliable offensive option among the guys that we're considering for this 5th spot right now. But Gabe... He's a technical defender. He's got good footwork. I think he's a smart defender. He can navigate screens. He could chase guys. The issue with Gabe is 6'2", and there's just a limitation to how good you can be. And he doesn't have the, like he's 30, but he doesn't have the Smart's listed at 220. Standing next to Smart, I think he's heavier than 220 in a positive way. And he's a guy who's been around 230, 235 for most of his career. So Smart is like, he's a boulder. And I just think with Gabe, like we have seen, for as good as he is from a technical perspective, from his footwork, from his discipline, from reading screens, from chasing guys, all that stuff is fundamentally sound. There's just a limiting factor with being a 6'2" point of attack guy, right? So if he's just guarding point guards, I'm fine with it. And even some 2s, I'm fine with it. The issue with Gabe is he can't guard wings. And the Lakers need a player who can guard at point of attack and guard wings. And really the only guy I think at this point that showed that is Vando. And that's the argument for Vando to start, is that Vando is by far their most versatile defender and their best guy at defending point of attack and wings, depending on what you need. Smart is more of a wing defender. Gabe is exclusively a point of attack guy or a chaser, but he's not a wing defender. He's not a wing stopper. In that case, I'd rather just have Rui, and that's the way it looks like it's going to go, right? It's probably going to be Gabe as the point of attack or chaser, Rui as the wing stopper. I just don't think that's that good. Like, to me, Gabe is more of a secondary defender or a secondary perimeter defender. He's not a primary guy. They only have 2 guys to me who can fit that primary role right now, and it's Vando and Smart. Smart has not been as good on, like, I think his screen navigation, sticking with guys on ball, especially in the middle of the floor, has not been great so far. I've liked him more on the wings and more against slower guys where he could use his chest, use his body, use his quick hands. So he is more of a wing defender. And that, again, it's tough. Like, I feel like like talking through this, I see the arguments for everybody. Gabe, it's the shooting, it's the pace that he plays with, what he adds to the offensive end, and then defensively, he is solid to good, and like there's a reliability there. Marcus, to me, it's the defensive versatility, and also a level of playmaking offensively, and he can hit threes as we saw. And then Vando, it's the defensive versatility to guard 1 through 4 just about anybody, but you come with real offensive limitations. So it's probably between Gabe and Smart based on like LA trying to balance both sides of the floor. I think Smart is the better player long term and is more capable of defending wings than Gabe is. So that to me would be more of a, like, I'll say this. I have more confidence in Austin as a point of attack guy than Rui as a wing stopper. That's the other thing here is, for me personally, I think between prioritizing point of attack and wing defense, I think I would rather prioritize wing defense and have Smart be that guy and Austin be the point of attack guy rather than Gabe be the point of attack guy and Rui be the wing stopper. But we'll see how JJ navigates that. Yaniv, hope I said that right. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the super chat. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Jake is painfully unathletic. He probably is not a playoff level player. Should use that money to get Horford/Sharp or both Melton and GP2 instead. So I think Jake can still be a useful player without being athletic, but I think we have seen the athletic limitations with him, and I think his defensive floor and maybe even ceiling, probably ceiling too. I think his floor and ceiling defensively are lower than, and I don't know if he's still getting into shape or what. Like, I thought that the defensive film last year on him in Memphis and Sacramento was better than what we've seen up to this point in the preseason. So I do want to leave him some room of like new team, first time being on a marquee team. He's only played in Memphis and Sacramento. You're flying under the radar there. This is like, you're on the Lakers, you're in the spotlight. Also his first time being like guaranteed rotation guy. I want to give him like a little bit of room to figure out. And as I said earlier, I don't think they figured out like his ideal role yet. And he's been a guy who some nights he's had to, like when Luka and Austin are out, he's handling the ball far more. And then when they've had the team at full strength, which has really been one game, but even a little bit that Phoenix game, he's just kind of parked in the corners and like not really doing much. So I think offensively, they still got to figure that out. And maybe that's just his role. And then defensively, I don't think he should be the best defender in the lineup. And to me is more of a secondary guy next to Smart or Vando or Gabe. Horford, I don't think was ever realistic. That was a pretty early in the offseason type thing where he and Golden State, figured something out. Sharp is an interesting one. I was on board with them getting Sharp. I think they should have traded for him in the DFS trade, but as I've said before, I heard they were not interested in that for whatever reason. And then Melton and GP2, Melton was a guy linked to them early in the offseason, but then as I reported, I started to hear he's going to Golden State. He ended up going to Golden State, and then that was the way that went. And then GP2, I think, was always going back to Golden State based on how things played out. So, yeah, I don't know how much really. I think Melton was the one realistic guy here, but they ended up prioritizing Laravia. Rob and Jeannie are trash emoji. We know our starting five. What will be our first 15 record? Okay. Let's look at the Lakers schedule. I think I said 6-4 through the first 10, so I will stick with that on the last time I was asked about the records. That's through the Atlanta game. I said 6-4, then goes at Charlotte, at OKC, at New Orleans, at Milwaukee. I think they go probably 2-2 there, and then home Utah. So I'll say 9-6 through 15. That is my prediction. Broke with no money. Thank you for the super chat. I'm cool with Gabe starting, but not closing. I prefer Marcus to close. That's also, I like the distinction here. Like, I for sure am on board with Marcus closing over Gabe. Also, like I will say with Marcus, he took one step back three, which I think he could do without that. Even the pull-up midi, I didn't love. I would like him to not take pull-up shots. I don't think that's really his bag. I think it's catch and shoot threes and then racking a closeout, getting to the rim. Again, we saw the Euro decel. He had another nice floater, and then he did have the pull-up midi. But overall, I would say he's had like A- shot selection. So I think it's been really good shot selection for the most part. There was the one step back three where I saw it. He called for the screen. The shot clock was starting to get to like 12 or 11 or so. I was like, he's going to take a pull up, or, it wasn't a pull up technically, it was a step back, but we could do without the Marcus step back threes. But yeah, I'm cool with him closing definitely over Gabe, but starting, I guess it's Gabe for now. I didn't like Jake in the preseason. He didn't play well enough to have more minutes than Vando. Yeah, I mean, I said that at the top. I think Vando should be playing more than Jake up to this point. I'm guessing it's more of a shooting thing and more of an offensive thing, but I think the Lakers, I think Vando's too important to the defense to have as small of a role as he might end up having. Bashir, thoughts on a Devin Carter trade? I just don't see where Devin Carter fits in the rotation. I have been thinking about that since I saw the Stein report, but let me pull up his contract. He's on a rookie scale. I guess if making 4.9 next year, 5.1 club option, I guess if you could flip Dalton for Devin Carter, I'd rather have Devin Carter, but that's another undersized guard who I think it's hard to have him, Gabe, and Marcus in the same rotation. Yeah, he's 6'2", 195. I like him. I don't think he's better than Gabe, and I don't think he's better than Marcus. So sure, if it's him versus Dalton, I'd rather just have, I think he's a better player than Dalton, but I don't know that you want three of your top 10 players being 6'3" or below. I think that's, with the way the league has shifted size wise, I think that's a bit problematic overall. Cage Britt, thank you for the super chat. Too early, but I like to see a Gabe/Maxi for KCP and DK plus a second for Highsmith. Luka, AR, KCP, Braun, DA, then Smart, Highsmith, Vando, or Jake, Rui, Hayes as bench players. Yeah, I would do both of these in a second. For as good as Gabe has played and seemingly is the fifth starter moving forward, I think KCP is a better player. Like, Gabe is a better shooter and a better movement shooter, and that is an important part of LA's offense, but KCP is bigger, and I think he has the versatility to be both a point of attack guy and a wing guy. Against some wings are going to be too big for KCP, but he could certainly scale up better than Gabe can. And I think he can guard some threes. I do think KCP has slipped a bit defensively the last couple of years. And for example, it at the time was viewed as like a loss, but I actually think a big shift in Denver's success last season was Christian Brown was much better than KCP was 2 years ago for Denver. So and part of that's just, Christian's an ascending player. He's in his mid-20s, but I thought that was a big actual upgrade for Denver. That was kind of not KCP has kind of carried this certain status because he has obviously won a championship or won a couple championships as a starter for LA and for Denver, but I don't think he's been quite the same player the last year or two. So point being, I think KCP and Gabe are a little bit closer than I think people might think, but I do think overall he fits more into what LA needs specifically than Dalton in a second for Highsmith. Yeah, I would do that in a second. But I like KCP and Austin as your two guard defenders. You are a little thin on the wing there, and maybe that's more of a Braun thing. But again, we're talking it's hard to find a guy who can defend at point of attack and wing and also shoot at a league average level based on the Lakers' current assets. And KCP is in that bucket. He's a little bit on the smaller side. I think a guy like a Dylan Brooks is much bigger. A Wiggins is much bigger. Those guys are more wing defenders than point of attack guys, but yeah, you got to make a sacrifice somewhere. You're not going to find the perfect player. So KCP is in the bucket of guys who I think check enough boxes that would be a starting upgrade. And then I like your bench depth at that point was Smart, to your point. Smart, Highsmith, Vando, Jake, Rui, Hayes. I think you go 11 deep at that point. Free, thoughts on Reeves' ability to organize second units? He's clearly improved as a scorer, but feel like he's gotten further away from playmaking and looking for others, which is needed without Braun. I think that was largely a result of Luka being out, and that was a big part of him looking more for his shot. I also feel like going back to the Phoenix game, there were several possessions where he could have had assists that guys missed shots, or Ayton caught the ball in the paint and got stripped or missed a hook shot or something. So I think his assist numbers were a little bit deflated compared to what they could have been or should have been. However, he certainly the first 3 games, he was much more geared towards scoring than playmaking. And this is a real question. And I wonder, I think maybe trying to have Smart be out there with Austin as a, like, if it's maybe Austin, Smart, Laravia as a trio, like now you have another couple of guys who can make connecting reads offensively. Smart can help co-run the offense to a degree. And you could also get Austin maybe on some off-ball actions, or Smart brings the ball up, then you're running a pin down or something for Austin. So I think there are ways, like, to me, the Lakers have enough ball handling and playmaking that is like this clear strength of this roster. It's like shot creation, playmaking, ball handling. They have that covered, and they don't even have LeBron right now, but like once LeBron comes back, it's like they have the 3 best shot creators / playmakers in the league in terms of like a trio together. Like that is, I don't think anyone else is close. Now, for the second unit stuff, I think they got to be intentional with how they build out some of the lineups with Austin, because I think if you put him out there with even Gabe and Vando and Jackson Hayes, it's like all of a sudden it becomes a little, do they have enough out there offensively? So I think, unfortunately for Luka, it's going to end up being maybe a little bit more like Luka and the Goons again. And then Austin, they're trying to balance it with a little bit more firepower on the offensive end. But I think this is an open-ended question right now. Like there have been some things I've liked with Austin, and he has progressed as a scorer for sure. To your point, the bag looks better, but is that going to translate to bench success? I think that's still TBD. Duran, would AR start on OKC, the Nuggets, the Cavs, and the Knicks? OKC, it's interesting because like those teams, the Austin spot is often the defender, right? So like with OKC, it's Dort. With Brown, with Denver, it's Brown. With Cleveland, you have 2 all-star guards in the backcourt. With the Knicks, it's just Brunson. I don't like Brunson and Reeves together. I think there's a lot of duplication there with how they play, and that would be a very problematic backcourt defensively. So he might not start he probably doesn't start on any of these teams. Like, I think he's a better player than Dort, and he's a better player than Christian Brown, but you need more defense and in off-ball play. And like Dort and Brown are going to space the floor, get out in transition, and then they're going to guard the best opposing. With OKC, you do have Shea, you do have J-Dub. So like, I mean, they have an embarrassment of riches defensively, but you know, it's tough. Like, I guess if you're trading, I don't know, in this hypothetical here, are you trading Brown and Dort, or like, is that starting spot open and Austin sliding in there, or it's like him versus a bench player and then they're making that call? Because if you just put Austin on the OKC roster, but then they still have Caruso coming off the bench, they have Wallace, like OKC is really deep. With Denver, and with Denver, I don't think an Austin Murray backcourt makes sense. And the key distinction I keep making with like Luka with Austin versus Austin with Murray or Austin and Brunson is those guys are point guard defenders, and those guys are small. Or Murray's relatively small. He's about a shooting guard size point guard, but Luka's a forward. So you can get, like, if you can nail the other perimeter defender, I think a Luka Austin plus perimeter defender can work. With Brunson and Austin, it's like that's just too problematic in my opinion. Cage Britt, we improved and were a 3 seed last year. So I know this is a big like perspective or talking point with a lot of Laker fans. And I agree. I think they were the 3 seed last year. That's a fact. And they did improve. But I think these things aren't in a vacuum, and you have to look at the rest of the West too, where the Lakers were tied with the Clippers and the Nuggets for 50 wins and the 3 seed, and they won because of the head-to-head. They won the tiebreaker. But you could argue, like, Denver had arguably the best offseason. Like, they were right there with Atlanta and Houston for best offseason of any team. You could argue Denver improved as much, if not more, than the Lakers. The Clippers revamped their bench, and I think with the additions of Collins and Lopez and Chris Paul, they are another team you could argue improved just as much, if not more, than the Lakers. So I think like a couple things can be true here. The Lakers were the 3 seed and they did improve, but there are other teams that I think Houston got better. They lost Van Vliet, so maybe that knocks them down a peg. Minnesota lost but like it's year 2 of Ant and Julius together. Maybe they have a better partnership now. Ant will continue to ascend. Golden State was 31-11 with Jimmy. They were on pace to win 60 games with Jimmy. Or after a certain point, I think maybe they were like 20-10 with Jimmy or something. But basically, they had a 61 pace with Jimmy, and I think they arguably got better. So the West is just tough. Like, you can get better and actually lose more games. That's just the conference. Catch up here in the chat. Chris, half of the Clips will be hurt by the playoffs. That's my biggest pushback with both the Clippers and the Warriors is those two teams are so old. And I think because of LeBron, people lump the Lakers into the old category. But LeBron and Marcus Smart are the only 2 rotation players above 30. Like, the Lakers are actually a relatively young team, especially in comparison with some of the other good teams. But the Clippers are old, and the Warriors, 3 best players are all 35 or older. So there are some real health and just like workload concerns with those teams at the top of their rosters. With the Clippers, it's the whole roster. Darren or Duran, what are realistic trades we can make by December? Well, I think that's the absolute earliest the Lakers will make a trade is like December 15th is the opening date for a bunch of free agents to be trade eligible. Then you have a second round of that January 15th. So that's typically like trade season. It's pretty much dead between that. Like, there'll be some exceptions and maybe there's an option that someone's going to pass up on or you will see some trades happen maybe between now and that. But there's a good portion of the league that cannot be traded currently because of the post free agency restriction rules. I think the low hanging fruit here is the Wiggins trade would be a potentially realistic trade, especially if Miami gets off to a slow start without Tyler Hero. The other one could be a Dylan Brooks trade, though I think that's more of a I think that's more of the war of attrition of the season and Phoenix finally admitting that they're not even a play-in team. Though I was impressed by Phoenix in the 2 games they played against the Lakers. Still don't think they're going to be a play-in team, and maybe by like January, maybe second half of January, they're looking at it like we're the 12th seed. What's the point of having Dylan Brooks on this team? Like, we should flip him for an expiring and an asset and do that. So those to me are the 2, like, again, just kind of going through rosters and who could be available and who's available for, I mean, there's smaller scale stuff that they could do depending on like what's going on with Utah. Toronto, I love Agbaji. That's a guy that I think could make a difference for LA. Like, Brooklyn is going to be looking to sell some of their guys, but I don't think a Michael Porter Jr., Cam Thomas makes much sense on this team. So, yeah, I would say New Orleans is the other one I've referenced that I think that's probably another like January, February, closer to the deadline. They just admit that they're not going to be a playing team either. But I think if you're talking like early, Wiggins is to me, or Miami, or like a team that could theoretically get off to a really slow start because they don't have Hero for at least the first few weeks of the season. If that team underperforms, maybe around Christmas time, they're like, hey, maybe it's better to just flip Wiggins for an expiring, get off the money, get an asset, and move on. Mr. TD says every offense is impressive versus the Lakers. That's a good point. That is a good point. It's a zombie. Buha. What's up, man? What's up, man? How's it going? Happy Saturday. Mo Love, what is the ceiling for this team overall? Any potential for growth? Certainly potential for growth. It's 6 preseason games. Let's not like act like the season's over or whatever. I think there's a lot of potential for growth on the offensive end, and that continues to me to be the most optimistic thing with this team. Is I really think they have top 5, if not top 3, offensive potential. The defensive end, I think there's some low hanging fruit stuff with like communication and just simple like not botching off ball screens and more effort and urgency in transition, and I think that's gotten better through the preseason. But see, there's a couple answers here because I think their ceiling as currently constructed and their ceiling with a trade and specifically like the right kind of trade to find the right fit starter. I think as constructed, this is probably a second round team in terms of ceiling, and maybe everything goes right, 3 or 4 seed, but I think like they would have to basically be healthy. Otherwise, like, Luka has to stay healthy. Of course, Austin has to stay healthy. LeBron has to come back sooner than expected. Then the role players need to stay healthy. And especially I think Smart and Vando, those are 2 guys where if those guys miss any significant chunk of time, I just don't think they have the defensive personnel to even be like, let's say they're around 20th defensively with those guys. Maybe I think they fall into like real dangerous territory without one of them, in my opinion. So I would say like a top 5 offense, somewhere between 16 and 20 defensively, and they win like 50, 51 games again, or like the 3 or 4 seed. With a trade, I think that could be closer to mid-50s, 2 or 3 seed, and maybe we're talking like conference finals or finals, but it has to be the right trade, and you need all the other variables to hit and guys stay healthy. So there's a lot of ifs with this team, but I think to really make some noise in the playoffs, I do think they need to make another trade. Cage Britt, I don't know if you already said it, but how was your birthday, Jovan? My birthday was great. I chilled all day with my wife. She spoiled me with crumble cookies and candy and coffee, and we had a nice day. Then we went to grab a burger at For the Win, which I had not yet tried yet. That was on my list of burger places around LA that I wanted to check out. So that was a great burger. And then we did a little bit of window shopping, didn't get anything, and then went to the movies and watched Good Fortune. And I highly recommend that. It was an interesting trio with Keanu, Aziz, and Seth Rogen. I love each of them individually. And I think Aziz and Seth is a more natural pairing. And I believe they've been in a couple of things together a while, years ago. But that was a fun trio, and it was a very 2025 movie, but it kind of had the old school comedy vibe to it that I love with some of the movies I've talked about before that they just don't really make anymore. And I really enjoyed it. Madison, top 3 offense and top 25 defense. I think the defense will be better than it looks, but even if you're around 20th, it's just, you're not really a contender. BC, they ranked 14th out of the 16 playoff teams in offensive scoring. Yes, I mean, what's funny with this is like the defense was actually better than the offense for large stretches of last season. I do think that with Ayton replacing Hayes and like Luka having the them building things more around Luka, Austin taking a step. Like, I think their offense underperformed last year. I think it will be better this year. I think it's already looked better. There was a lot more room to grow there. I think defensively they actually punched above their weight, and I think their defense is kind of coming back down to earth a little bit more. And it already came back down to earth at the end of last season and in the playoffs as well. But it's been a struggle in the preseason. We got a Clippers fan in here saying the Lakers are a 6th to 7th seed at best. I'm sure the chat will enjoy that. Mr. TD says rate the burger. I gave the burger an 8.4 because I did not really like the sauce. I think the burger, I got a triple smash burger. The sauce it had a little bit of a kick and it would just, I'm a weird with burgers where I like as few like condiments and things on it. I really like to enjoy, I'm going to be careful how I say this, the meat and cheese together. I like that flavor. And if you have an overpowering sauce sometimes, like I like sauces that kind of complement the burger, don't take away from it. And I didn't really like their sauce. So I think moving forward, I will get it without the sauce. So I feel like it's probably a 9 or a 9.2 for me without the sauce, trying to project how much the sauce took away from it. But yeah, Cage Rip pause. Hit the pause button. Hit the pause button. Big pause button here. Mr. TD, triple damn big boy. Yeah, you should see my In-N-Out order. I sometimes go 4x4 or 5x5. I am 6'5", 200, 205. So I am a big boy. Lee Baggy, thank you for the super chat. Did the Lakers keep any guys from what they had this preseason? I think you're talking about, so they waived basically all the Exhibit 10 guys, including RJ Davis, who I thought was a standout performer in the preseason. So they waived him. They waived Augustus Marciulionis, probably butchered that, Anton Watson, and Nate Williams. So they still have Magnon, they still have Nick Smith, and they still have Christian Koloko as their three two-way guys. This was the time, like, you have to waive these guys going into the regular season. I'm sure some of those guys will stick in South Bay, but BC In-N-Out sauce. Yes, I do like In-N-Out sauce. Love In-N-Out sauce. Shake Shack sauce. Say that 5 times fast. Not as good as In-N-Out sauce, and that's. I've had a pendulum swing where I've gone back and forth between liking In-N-Out or Shake Shack more. I'm currently in an In-N-Out phase. My son loves it, so that's part of it. Is we have In-N-Out like almost every day when we're together. But yeah, it's definitely In-N-Out sauce is better. Cage Brit, meat, pause. Thank you for the super chat. But yeah, I had to be careful there. Michael D, thank you for the super chat. 65205, you are the next point of attack defender for the Lakers. Honestly, if I didn't tear my Achilles, I might have had a shot, but I'm since not playing as frequently as I used to. But hey, if we do the pickup game against the coaches, I will be out there. I will elbow some people. I might get into it. I might get ejected. It'll be fun. Mr. TD, In-N-Out is cheap and solid if you know how to order. Yeah, I mean, especially in comparison with Shake Shack. Like my order at In-N-Out with my son is probably close to $25 to $30. At Shake Shack, it'd probably be over 50. Shakira says, cool, your Reeves' height. Yeah, I might be a little tall. Like, I'm 6'5" without shoes, so with shoes, I'm probably 6'6", but yeah, I think I'm a little bit taller than him. But he's, of course, much quicker, more athletic, better at basketball. Cage Brit, rank them. Jovan, In-N-Out, Shake Shack, 5 guys. This is easy for me. I'll go in the order you just said. In-N-Out, Shake Shack, 5 guys. I vehemently hate 5 guys' fries. I think they are disgusting. I think they are atrocious. So Also, Five Guys is the most expensive here. So if we're going like value versus price, it's certainly In-N-Out, Shake Shack, Five Guys. I think pound for pound, like when people talk about Allen Iverson being the pound for pound best player, best scorer, whatever, that's how I feel about Shake Shack. But the price, I don't think Shake Shack is better than In-N-Out to the degree that the price warrants like the increase, right? So like you can get a combo at In-N-Out is cheaper than a double or a double burger at Shake Shack. So I agree with this order here. Five Guys, I think even from just how good it is not as good as Shake Shack or In-N-Out. But then when you factor in the price and those disgusting potato fries, it's a no from me, dog. Mo Love, so you're even more white than AR. I'm more Serbian than AR, we'll say. I got the Serbian Jokic. I also tore my Achilles, though, so that, like, now when I play basketball, I'm very careful with my jumping. DJ Activist, what's good? Buha Gang, what's good, guys? Austin asked, do I get Animal Style? I do. I don't. Sometimes Animal Style fries. My son loves Animal Style fries, but I'm more just like. Well, I got to be careful what I say now. You guys are trying to get me back in the hot water here with the meat quotes that I gotta be careful with here. But yes, I'm more of a just meat and cheese guy. Pause. Free with a big word here. How fungible is the starting lineup to you based on matchups? I just don't see how last night's lineup matches up with teams like the Rockets, for example, Mavs too. This is a really good question. It's a really good point. And I wish I kind of hammered it. Like I did mention that JJ said it's for just opening night and he will continue to evaluate it. It sounds like based on at least what he said last night, it could be an evolving or maybe revolving starting group where it is a bit more matchup based. I think I'm a believer in finding your starting group, and unless a player is underperforming or there's an injury or like someone really pops off the bench that like changes how you view the starting group, I think it's important to have a set starting lineup in rotation. And again, like JJ loves to reference last year, the starting group lasted 8 games. That was because ultimately you could not have a D'Lo Austin backcourt together, and you needed to make some changes there. So they had to move on from that. We could get to a similar point with this starting group, but I think, in my opinion, the ideal thing is to find the starting group, have your set rotation, and get as many reps and minutes together as you can with your key lineups. And you don't really want to be messing with that too much. And then also players don't have a set role. They don't know when they're coming in. It's harder for them to get into a rhythm. And also it's harder to build continuity with certain lineups. Like you can maybe have your go-to bench lineups and maybe it's like a changing starting group, but there is a ripple effect between the starting group like into the bench in the overall rotation. So, I mean, based on what JJ is saying, it sounds like it could be that. And I agree that that group is probably too small to play against a Houston, a Dallas, that there are going to be some teams with double bigs are going to give the Lakers some problems on the offensive glass and in the paint. But I will note again, I thought the Lakers looked best defensively against Dallas, in part because of Dallas's limitations, but also because Dallas is a bit bigger and slower. And I think when LA can actually match up in the front court and it's not like a speed athleticism thing, the way that Golden State, Phoenix, and Sacramento attack them, I think they could actually match up fine in a half court setting. So we'll see. I would rather settle on Gabe, Smart, or Vando and just keep that guy as the fifth starter, but maybe it is a bit of a rotation until JJ figures out who he really wants. Sarah says Neapolitan shake with a bunch of greater than symbols. Yes, Neapolitan is great. I'm weird with like I'm more of a vanilla guy than chocolate with ice cream specifically. Like when it comes, like I will have a bunch of chocolate, or my wife loves Nutella. Like, so with like actual chocolate and chocolates. Like I love candy and all that stuff. But when it comes to actual ice cream, I'm much more of a vanilla ice cream guy than chocolate. So for me, actually, vanilla strawberry shake is my go-to if I'm going to do a shake. Thomas, I have a feeling Max Christie or Najee may become available this year. They have a lot of guys in Dallas who deserve big mins. That would be good for us. Yeah, one of those guys, either one would help. I also think if they could somehow swing Gafford, that would be like Gafford plus one of those guys. Thomas, Daniels, and a Kongu trade. That's going to cost Reeves, and I don't think the Lakers do that. And I also don't see why Atlanta would want Reeves and Trey together. That's arguably to me like the worst Reeves pairing of any like high usage star would be 6 foot Trae Young. Ron, yo, with the cap space this summer, could you see the Lakers targeting Dyson Daniels and or Kessler as a priority over LeBron, especially if Braun is not as good this year? The issue here is just going to be restricted free agency. It's really tough for guys. Like restricted free agency is currently set up to screw the player, and really it's like there's a major home court advantage for teams. So with both Dyson Daniels and Walker Kessler, I love both of them as fit. Like Dyson is, I've talked about Herb Jones maybe being the best fit next to Luka and Austin. You could throw Dyson Daniels in that mix. I haven't even considered him because I feel like he's untouchable basically for Atlanta right now. But he would be a great fit next to Luka and Austin. And Kessler, you guys know how I feel about Kessler. I would give up a lot to get Walker Kessler, but in terms like I think. So I agree with you in theory in terms of like targeting those guys over potentially keeping LeBron just for like the long-term health of this core and what like the future iteration of this group looks like. But I don't see either one of those guys being realistic for like, I think there's almost no contract that those guys or no qualifying offer those guys could sign with the Lakers that their teams don't match. Raphael, Buha, which LA player is most likely to get traded? Well, Gabe's making it tough with the way that he's playing, and he just earned a starting spot. That's actually, I'm glad you brought this up because I think that's an ancillary benefit to Gabe is like we know sometimes when guys are potentially going to be trade candidates, like you want to improve their value, and certainly Gabe is trending in a positive direction on the trade front. I still think he has more value to the Lakers than anybody else, but you factor in like each passing day, it's less money you owe him. It's closer to being expiring. If he continues to start and play well, shoot well, if he could be like a 40% or high 30% 3-point shooter on like a higher volume, that increases his trade value. And even if and maybe increases his trade value and you still want to keep him, but then he's also just playing better. So like he's just a better player. So either way, it's like you want Gabe to play better and potentially have a bigger role because if he's playing well, that's just helping the team. But then also if he's playing well, he has more trade value. So that's a factor here. I would still go Maxey and Dalton as the two players most likely to be traded. Maxey expiring contract in around 11 million. So that's like a decent size number that you could attach into trades. Like if it's Rui plus Maxey, Gabe plus Maxey, Dalton plus Maxey, that gives you some flexibility in terms of you could get with those combinations anywhere between like 15 to 30 million in terms of salary, roughly. Dalton, I think that one's self-explanatory with just where he's at in the pecking order right now, his struggles, and they already traded him. So we know that they are open to at least considering that. So I would say Dalton and Maxey are the two. Mo Love, how much of DK's issues are around system fit and his seemingly slow processing speed? I think I think you could take out seemingly here. I think the slow processing speed is the primary issue for him on both sides of the ball. There is certainly a system fit. Like I made this point I don't know, I forgot, it was a stream or two ago. I think the best thing for Dalton, and Charlotte would have checked this box for sure, but I think the best thing for Dalton would be to be traded to a lottery Eastern Conference team that nobody pays attention to, where he can cook and develop in anonymity or relative anonymity. I think Laker fans will always be paying attention to Dalton moving forward, just to kind of see, especially if he gets traded, like how his career plays out, and if the Lakers make a mistake with that or whatever, where he's at on the Krubot scale, as you guys have deemed it. So I think it's largely a processing issue. There is a system fit because the Lakers need him to be more of a catch and shoot spot up guy. And I think he's more of a rhythm based guy who needs a certain, similar to Gabe, kind of needs to touch the ball a little bit. Although Gabe, I think, has shown some real progress in not needing the ball as much this preseason, Dalton has not yet evolved to that. And then there's also just the Lakers don't have a lot of good defenders, and Dalton is their worst rotation defender, and that then kind of limits some of the lineups that he's in. So certainly a system fit and like a roster fit issue right now, but I think the biggest thing is his processing. Mo Love, I was trying to be nice and not presumptive. Well, I said it for you. Sunken City Ship says Dalton to the Nets. That's another one. Doesn't have. I always envision like the Southeast Division, like a Washington, Charlotte, one of those teams, but it could also be Brooklyn. Free, is Laravia the team's most attractive trade piece outside of AR? 23 years old, very cheap 2-year deal with no options. No, I think it's Rui. I think it's Rui because he's an expiring, but he's also a guy who could start or be, a high level bench guy. So I think Rui is the second most attractive, realistic trade asset behind Austin. Laravia is in the mix. I mean, he's had a rough preseason, but I think, yeah. Raphael, trade targets, one love from New Jersey. Wiggins is the only guy that's really been linked to the Lakers going back to the offseason that I think makes sense. I've brought up Dylan Brooks or potentially one of the New Orleans wings later on in the season, but I think it's a little early. I think it's right now it's more speculation than like actual knowing who's available. I think we got to see like which teams struggle, which players struggle, which teams have injuries. There's a lot of factors that are going to determine who's available. Madison says, yeah, let's trade our best shooter and someone who actually showed up in the playoffs in Rui, LOL. I was not, well, I don't know if you're talking to me. I was not saying to trade Rui. I was saying who has the second most value, to be clear. I was not advocating for a Rui trade. All right, I'm going to go about 5 more minutes here. So if you guys got any questions, let's get them in. Raphael, is AR still untouchable? I mean, I don't think he's I don't think he's ever been untouchable. I think they've just had a really, really high standard for trading him. And I think that has not changed. I also think that if one thing that has been clear to me, and I thought was clear last night to an extent, is they are going to kind of go offensively to a degree based on how Luka and Austin go. Luka was great offensively in both games. I thought Austin was really good in 3 of the 4. And then even last night, like, shot didn't fall, but made up for it with playmaking. If you trade Austin, people, Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, whoever, you whatever guard you want to, or wing you want to trade him for that's more defensive minded than offensive minded, I think this team's ceiling offensively takes a big hit, especially with LeBron out. And even with LeBron in, they were phasing more of his responsibility off to Austin. And I don't see another guy on this roster that can amass like Austin's usage and role. It's not Gabe. It's not Marcus. Those guys do not have the bag that he has offensively. They don't have the 3-level scoring that he has offensively. They don't get to the free throw line the way that he does. So I think you really hit this team's, unless you could find a guy who can do a lot of what he could do offensively and is a defensive upgrade, which I've yet to see that player be mentioned for Austin. And I don't know who that is off the top of my head. Like, I just think he's too important for what this team's trying to do offensively. Mo Love, did JJ seem more chill with the media this year, or are you afraid to say? He seems more measured, but you can still see the wheel spinning. I'm not afraid to say. I think he has been I would say more chill is maybe a way to put it. He's not had like some of the viral moments that he had last year yet, although it's the preseason. Like I would hope he was not crashing out in the preseason, though he admitted that he crashed out last preseason. So I guess there's been some progress there with how he views some of these things. I would say he's been more chiller. I feel like, at least in my observations, he hasn't been as like chatty with the media as he was last season. And I also think that's like sometimes how these things go with the start of the season is everybody's a little bit more focused and like wound up to start the year. And then once we're in like the first week of December and we're 20 games into the season, like everyone's a little bit more relaxed because you're just into the flow of the season. There's like a little bit more pressure to start the year, if that makes sense. But I would say he's been more chill overall. I think that's fair way to put it. But I would say maybe not as like friendly or chatty as he was last year. Madison, Austin's fine right now because of his contract, but if he keeps choking in the playoffs, making $35 million, LA will never recover. This is why I continue to beat the drum of, I think the approach with Austin this year is evaluate his fit with Luka, evaluate his fit in the playoffs, re-sign him next offseason, no matter what, because you don't want to lose him for nothing. And then if you do not like the fit or there's just too much of a limitation there with him and Luka, you flip him next year. But yeah, that for sure, like he's got, like, it's going to be different when we're judging him on a $35 million scale versus a $14 million scale. On a $14 million scale, he is more than doubling his value right now. And it's one of the better, like, non-rookie contracts in the league. Once he gets to 35, it's a different, you're in that like all-star, fringe all-star ballpark. And that's where you have to deliver at a certain level, which I would argue I think he has up to this point, but the Minnesota series obviously left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. He has had back-to-back series where he struggled to be a catch and shoot guy, and that needs to improve. Thomas, not a fan of the 1 through 4 and 1 through 5 switching because 8 needs to be at the basket defending and Luka needs to stay on wings and forwards. Yeah, this is something that they got to figure out. I think they've been more selectively switching overall, which I think is a positive, but there was, especially in the Sacramento game, there's still times Luka was picked on. There's times Austin was picked on. Even Rui switched on to some of the guards. I don't love. Yeah, I mean, there's also just real defense limitations with this group. I don't know. But in general, I agree with you. Mo Love, just want to say that your YouTube content and coverage of the Lakers is the best among them all. Thanks for the effort. I appreciate that. I know we don't always agree, but I try to see every conceivable angle and counterpoint and try to have a discussion with you guys. Madison, with I think this is an astute point here. Most of the thing with Austin is it has nothing to do with him. It has to do with his fit around Luka. That's where the questions are. The thing I point to is Luka has made it work with Jalen Brunson, the pre-New York Jalen Brunson, who is not, like, when we hear Jalen Brunson, we think of the New York Jalen Brunson. He was not as good in Dallas. I think this version of Austin is a better player than the Dallas version of Jalen Brunson, not the New York version. And then Kyrie, who obviously is also at a different level than Austin, but like the player archetype is a similar one of an offensive-minded guard who's probably at their best as the lead ball handler, but has to be off of the ball next to Luka. defensively, Austin 6'5", Kyrie 6'3", Jalen Brunson's 6 foot maybe. So like Austin, I think has a certain floor defensively that's a little bit higher than both of those guys. But the offensive end, obviously, it's still a work in progress in terms of fitting Luka and Austin together. And then you still just in general have defensive concerns with those two. So definitely, I think it's more of a fit thing and figuring out if they can work together long term rather than like I think Austin's a really good player and he's developed into a third option. It's just there is a lot of overlap with him and Luka that like I think this is a different if it's like Austin with J-Dub and Chet or something like that, or I just think if he has like two really good or it's AD. Let's say this is like the future. They didn't make the Luka trade, and it's like AD, J-Dub in Austin, or AD some type of like elite two-way wing and Austin. I think that trio works really well together. The issue is like if your two best players are Luka and Austin, you just have a certain defensive floor and ceiling that might not be high enough, but we won't know that until we have more of a sample size. Mr. TD says it ain't Austin's fault the rest of the roster are bums. I mean, this is, I'm not going to go that far, but I would say like it's definitely not the best roster construction around, like I believe in building your roster around your pillars, and the Lakers have made it clear they view Austin as a pillar. If your pillars are Austin and Luka, and of course LeBron, I do not think this is the best roster build around those three and what those three need. They need defense and athleticism and shooting, and a lot of the players on this team have like one of those three or maybe two. I don't know if any of them have all three, and that's an issue. What does it matter, bruh? One of the best names on here. Thank you for the super chat. Going into another year of Rui guarding the perimeter and undersized wings is the definition of insanity. You're preaching to the choir here. I think the Rui fit is awesome offensively with Luka. I think he even comparing him to a guy like PJ Washington, I actually think Rui fits arguably better offensively than PJ Washington did. Like the cutting, the getting out in transition with the hit ahead stuff, him cutting, he's really improved as that, we know the baseline cutter, even slot cuts. And then also the catch and shoot, like Rui has just become a really, really, really good catch and shoot guy. The issue is the defensive end. He is not a wing stopper. I would even argue you probably want him as your third best defender in the front court. That's just not going to happen when he's playing next to Luka because he's a better defender than Luka. Or at least a better on-ball defender than Luka. Luka's a better help defender. But overall, I would say in the aggregate, Rui's a better defender. So like Rui's always going to be at least the second best defender in the front court in any Luka lineup. And that's where you just run into some issues where, again, if Vando was a better offensive player or Marcus Smart was a little bit bigger, I think there's a clear answer here. And like those guys plus Rui plus Luka works. That's not the case. And the Lakers are in this really tough spot where they're probably relying on Rui again to be a stopper, where it's just, that's not like he's exceeded expectations. And I think he's really grown in that regard, but Rui should not be your best perimeter defender above 6'6" in a lineup. Mo Love, all we need is a point of attack / perimeter defender that can shoot and has a decent B-ball IQ. Yeah, that's the guy they need to trade for. Smokey Jovan asked Trevor this as well. Would you have rather signed DFS and traded Rui and got a big, or signed Jake and Ayton over the summer? It depends on who the big is. If you could have got Nick Claxton, I'm a big Nick Claxton guy. I think he's a better lob finisher than Ayton. Ayton's, of course, a more talented and skilled offensive player. But Claxton's definitely a better perimeter defender, more versatile defender, could switch on to players, I think, at a better rate. He doesn't have the same, like, Ayton's a bit bigger overall, so I think he could hold up better maybe in the post and around the basket than Claxton. That's one of Claxton's weaknesses, is he's on the thinner side. But, I mean, I guess would I rather have DFS and Claxton or Rui, Jake, and Ayton? That's tough. You also would have had an extra roster spot to sign someone, so I'd like to know like who they would have signed in this scenario that would potentially swing this. I think you're definitely better defensively with DFS and Claxton. And so I might lean that way. You do take a big hit offensively, like replacing and DFS isn't healthy right now. So that's another thing with the ankle situation. So this is tough. Like in theory, if you told me DFS was healthy and you told me who the other person they signed was, I might lean the DFS Claxton free agent X path, but with DFS banged up, not knowing who they would have signed, I guess by default, you kind of got to lean the depth route with this group with Rui, Jake, and Ayton. Smokey says, no way does Rui fit better than PJ. I'm talking specifically offensively. I think PJ is a better defender, a better rebounder, and like when factoring in the whole, like every facet of the game, I think PJ fits better than Rui does. I think Rui's a better shooter than PJ. And I think Rui's probably a better cutter. So I actually think Rui's a better fit offensively, but PJ's a better player, and he's also a better fit when you factor in the defensive end. Rich, thank you for the super chat. Happy birthday, Jovan. Is everything good between Braun and the Lakers? Are you trying to... you tried to get me in trouble here. I would say no. I don't think things are like dire or in like a horrible place, but they've certainly been in a better place. I made that point earlier in the offseason. I think things have gotten better since even that point. Even then I was saying things had gotten better up to that point. I think things have gotten even better up to this point, but like, I think there's been some better times. There have been some worse times. This is probably somewhere in the middle, but certainly I think just looking at the contract situation, some of the reporting around that, the statement that was released, and then just some of the ways some of the stuff's been handled in the preseason. Yeah, I think it's fair to... I think you could infer what you want from that, but yeah, it could certainly be better. Let's I don't want to wrap there. So if you guys got one more question, I will, Westwood, Keon Ellis looks like a young Byron Scott out there, needs to be the next to Luka Magic. I will say, Keon Ellis and Nick Clifford, some of the passes that he was making were like, of course, like Luka and then Austin were the two best passers on the floor. I thought Nick Clifford was clearly the third best passer on the floor. And some of his passes were, if we were doing like top 5 passes in the game, and in a game that Luka played in, a game that Austin played in, Marcus Smart had some really nice reads. I think Nick had at least 2 of the top 5 best passes of the game, if not even 3. And he just was, he was impressive. Sham, anyway, we can do DK for Keon. In theory, no, because Keon is a better player and he's a much, much, much better defender. However, it's the Kings, and you can't rule out any potential trade for the Kings, especially if it's leaning more into the offensive end, which they're seemingly just leaning into all offense. David Parks, thoughts on Nesmith Shepherd? I don't think Nesmith is going to be... Shepherd, I think will be available for the right price. I don't think Nesmith is going to be available for what's realistic with the Lakers. Like if we're talking, I don't even know if Rui plus a first gets you Nesmith, basically is what I'm saying. And I think that I think is the starting point, and it might have to be more. So unless you're giving up Austin, which is a different conversation entirely, but I also have made the point, I don't think Austin and Tyrese make sense together. Glenn, thank you for the super chat. Happy birthday, Jovan. I appreciate it. I'm going to wrap here before we devolve into the pit that is the Sacramento Kings and their decision-making process. But appreciate you guys for rocking with me for almost 2 hours here. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Monday with a preseason stock report. I'm going to go through several players and just areas of the game that are trending up, trending down, trending neutral, and just sort of the state of the team going into opening night. I will also have a big announcement on Monday that I'm very excited for. I think you guys will enjoy what I will be sharing, and myself and a couple other people. So be on the lookout for that. I'll be active on the Discord for the rest of the weekend. So if you guys are not in there yet, make sure you check it out. But appreciate you guys. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Thanks for tuning in on a Saturday afternoon/evening when, didn't have to. So I appreciate it. Shout out to you all, and I will talk to you all on Monday.